Today it's Thursday, the 9th of September. You're watching The Quest with me, Addiel Sabir, helping you understand how Pakistan connects to the region and beyond. Now, it's just been short of 2 weeks since the US withdrawal seen in Afghanistan, and most recently, the recent development is that the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan has now announced its temporary caretaker government. Now, what lies ahead is a plethora of challenges for the incoming Afghan government, and namely trust, not only with the international community, but also on the ground with its own people who seem to be worried about their future, about their livelihoods, as we saw some of the mad rush seen at Kabul airport when the last of the US planes were leaving, people from Afghanistan desperately trying to get out of the country. How will the Afghan Taliban now deal with the state machinery, which has seemingly come to a grinding halt? What of the economy? What of the business challenges ahead? And today we'll also be examining one particular subject which may have gone under the radar but hasn't gone away. That is COVID. COVID in Afghanistan. A nation of 40 million, and so far only 1.8 million vaccines have been administered. Now, to discuss these developments, we're joined by panelists. First, let me introduce Asif Durrani. He's a former ambassador and also a political analyst. Thank you for joining us. Sumaira Malik, who joins us, she is a Islamabad bureau chief here, and she's also recently returned from Afghanistan and seen things up front and close. And we have Moya Jafri. He is a political analyst who joins us from Lahore. Thank you for your participation. Just want to begin with you, Ambassador. We've seen this latest temporary 33-member government, which is seen hawkishly by particularly the United States and some Western capitals because of the presence of the old guard, as they say, because of the fact that it's not been necessarily inclusive as they had wanted to see. So just your take, if I can just take your view of some of the reactions which we've been seeing, particularly from the international community, vis-a-vis this caretaker government.
Well, I think the American or Western reaction to caretaker Taliban government is strange. Reason being that they said these are all the hawks. I wondered who are the doves among the Taliban, whether they were ruling prior to 9/11 or the Taliban movement itself. It in fact fought their way to victory, and now they are in power in the country. So as far as their cabinet is concerned, they say it is interim. But my view is that whether it is interim or permanent, Taliban are a reality. And they, in fact, they subscribe to an ideology which wants strict implementation of Sharia. Now, if the Americans have problem with that, I think then that is the job of the Afghans to decide what to do. And mind you, it was also the previous government led by Ashraf Ghani. They were also, I mean, they were not non-Muslims. They used to prostrate 5 times a day. So it was a power struggle, there is no doubt about it. Americans were siding with Ashraf Ghani, or they had put up Ashraf Ghani in the government. And it got defeated because of its inefficiencies, its corruption, its incompetence. Now, if Taliban have come, yes, they will be now facing myriad challenges, which we all know. So I don't subscribe to the American view or others that they are now criticizing that what kind of a cabinet is this. So my view is that they are only beating about the bush because they are a reality. Now you want to deal with them, please do that. If you don't want to deal with them already, they have been under sanctions, they have been in the state of war, they'll continue to be in a state of war. Yes.
Absolutely. Just want to bring in Moya Jafri. We've heard the ambassador talk about specifically some of the international community who perhaps, as our Foreign Minister Shahram Qureshi has said, that it needs to be seen through a different lens. So of those international countries who are neighbouring Afghanistan, of course, we saw a ministerial level conference take place virtually yesterday. whereby the neighbours were engaged about what the steps forward are. So how do you see the reaction of the immediate neighbours, and what did you conclude from the remarks of Shah Mahmood Qureshi yesterday following that conference?
It's a very interesting mix, and a very interesting picture is coming out of all of this, Adil. As we saw today, the Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid they issued a statement saying that the United States government is violating the Doha Pact by not getting the Taliban off of its blacklist now that they are a legitimate government. So as Ambassador Durrani pointed out very clearly, and rightly so, that there's this confused approach by the Western countries. When it comes to the regional countries, we saw yesterday the initiative taken by Pakistan. Very important development followed right after that, where Pakistan has now sent 3 aircrafts full of aid into Afghanistan to avoid any humanitarian crisis, brewing in that country. China has pledged $31 million, plus it has pledged 3 million COVID-19 vaccine doses to be sent into Afghanistan. So as it appears, the way I can see it, the countries neighboring Afghanistan, who obviously have a bigger stake when it comes to their own sovereignty, when it comes to the border security, also, and most importantly, the economic growth of the region, which heavily depends upon a stable Afghanistan, because it is kind of in the middle of it all, and could and should house very important trade routes that can lead to the economic prosperity in the region. Pakistan has a number of, you could say, not exactly pacts, but MOUs signed with countries on the other side of Afghanistan. So Pakistan is genuinely interested in a peaceful and stable Afghanistan. China would want its BRI to get another arm through Afghanistan, because that will make it easier. It already has invested in Pakistan $400 billion pledged when it comes to the next phase of BRI through Iran. So all these things. So I believe that what we're going to see in the future, that these neighboring countries who do not hold any geostrategic ulterior motives, if you will, would step up and act more decisively and more constructively to the future of Afghanistan, rather than the Western countries who are kind of trying to play this, carrot and stick approach, making the Taliban walk on eggshells and pointing them out, oops, you did it again, whenever and however they please. So these countries, I believe, will be taking the leading role when it comes to the future development of Afghanistan.
Okay, so now we've got a perspective for both of our guests regarding not just the allies and the United States and their reaction, of course, the immediate neighbouring countries as well. So the trust element, which I spoke about, that with the international community, as Moyed has said, is more of a carrot and stick approach. Now we're coming to the trust on the ground with the Afghan people themselves. Of course, these are the people who matter, and more often than not, these are the people who are the forgotten stories. But this is not a story, unfortunately, which can be forgotten. I just want to bring in our Islamabad Bureau Chief, Sumaira Khan, who has been there on the ground. She was there when the evacuations were taking place. She was there and she witnessed the state of affairs when the last American planes left Kabul. Sumaira, we're talking about the trust deficit. Of course, a 20-year period in which the Afghan Taliban have not been seen or actively seen. So give us a little an understanding of what you saw on the ground, particularly with the Afghan people. Was it a more worried feel that you got, or did you feel that there was a sense of relief in many ways, as being reported by the Afghan Taliban themselves? Your sort of like summary on what you saw when you were out there.
Thank you so much, Adil. And I think I've been speaking about it a lot in last few days, and let me say last few weeks now. And what I saw in Kabul, what I saw on ground, it was totally in completely. It was in a stark contrary to the narrative that was being built up by the Western media over there. And since we were staying together at one hotel, so we knew how they are planning it, how they are deliberating upon it, how to present a picture from Kabul's streets and roads. But since we were there and we had to report what is exactly happening, so let me share a few salient features from that reportage of Kabul and Afghanistan entirely. When I crossed into Afghanistan, the first village of Afghanistan is Samarkhel Kabul camp. It's called Samarkhel Kabul camp, and people were totally like they were having their normal routine over there. Why we say that? And it was pretty much easy going with the Afghans, we know, because these Afghans have been facing these kinds of invasions and foreign occupations for last 70 years. It was not a kind of a first invasion on them from US side. They have been handling Soviets, they have been handling US in particular, and they have been handling matters with Britishers as well. So it's not a story of 20 years under the occupation of US. It's a long story for Afghans. Now what they only mean is their business. I have seen the business community quite okay, satisfied, totally into the loop, on board, in confidence with Taliban quarters. And I have seen Taliban delegations meeting with the health officials, primarily with the health officials. And I was I was thinking about it, that why in every province that is falling to Taliban, why is I needed to understand the case, that why delegations of Taliban's highest officials, they are meeting the health officials in every province. Later I came to know that what's the understanding between them, and why they are meeting the municipality officials over there, because they wanted the administration on board with them. And now I can tell you with confidence, I've seen that the business community, the health department and the municipality departments, those who directly are linked with the daily business of people in every vilayat, they call a province a vilayat in their language. So they were satisfied unless they are having their businesses in a straight line, streamlined, and everything is going smooth and well, they are okay. Yes, there is a fear, concern amongst the women, because they were having important slots in the ministries. They were having an exclusive ministry in the name of Umure Zan in Kabul. That is, I think that's not included in this 33 member cabinet right now in the interim setup. But I've spoken to one of the spokesperson of Taliban, Zabihullah Mujahid, and he said that a lot to come in the aftermath. And once we have complete control of Afghanistan and we are done with all the disturbed business. And now I can't just bracket this disturbed business, because they are well aware of their internal matters. So he said that once we are done with the disturbed business, we are troubleshooting everything. Women are welcome to all the ministries and we are giving them their due share. But right now we are handling a grave and a gigantic propaganda campaign against the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. So these were the things that I've seen on roads and streets of Kabul. But let me just conclude it for you in easy terms, that majority of Kabul's portion and majority of Afghanistan's portions, they were pretty okay with the new setup. And I think they are going to be more okay in the days to come.
A very interesting an account from Sumaira Khan there, contrary, as she says, to perhaps some of the Western media outlets. Of course, everything needs to be taken with a pinch of salt, with some scarce information coming out at the moment. Just want to change focus now away from the trust element now to one of the other major challenges facing the incumbent government. That is how to kickstart the state machinery. Now, Afghan's former president, who now is in self-imposed exile, was recently announcing that he was sorry for the way things had happened and that he had not stolen state treasure. For now, though, the economy, as Shah Mahmood Qureshi, Pakistan's foreign minister, said, that needs to be prevented from going into an economic meltdown. What are some of the business challenges ahead? I just want to bring in now Ambassador Durrani. Ambassador Durrani, let's begin with one of the sort of like the elephant in the room, if I may say so, sanctions. Now, of course, we know that the sanctions which were imposed by the world over the Afghan Taliban regarding terror financing, regarding money laundering, What do you think will transpire now vis-a-vis the sanctions, particularly? And also, could you just perhaps touch on some of the National Reserve, which obviously sits with the Americans as well? Do you think that the Afghan Taliban will be given access to that as well in two parts?
Well, it's too early to say because the majority of the caretaker cabinet is under sanctions. They figure in a Taliban sanction list, which is called 1988 list. And out of 33, I think 27 are on the sanction list. But again, when we earlier talked about the trust issue, the trust was the first casualty because Taliban were fighting the American forces or American-led coalition forces. So in this whole issue, of course, Afghanistan's economy would be of dire importance for everyone because we can say that Afghanistan is facing a meltdown, economic meltdown. As you have pointed out, Americans have withheld Afghanistan's central bank's $9.5 billion reserves. Secondly, IMF has withheld its SDR's special drawing rights of $460 million. Similarly, other donor nations, in November last year, there was a conference of 60 countries. They had pledged US $12 billion. Those are unlikely to be given to the new dispensation in Afghanistan. If that is the case, then naturally Taliban will be left with very difficult choices, especially paying salaries to the government servants. And when you say government servants, so the bulk are the teachers. So how the teachers will be paid salaries. And then you have to run other affairs of the state, especially, for instance, Afghanistan imports electricity from Uzbekistan. So how they are going to pay, and that has to be paid in hard cash. So if they don't have the capacity to pay, so Kabul and other cities may plunge into darkness. And again, that would be a big problem. Same is the case with the health and other facilities, although humanitarian assistance can be rushed, and already like Pakistan has sent humanitarian assistance of food and medicines. Same can happen from WHO and other UN agencies. They can rush assistance to the country. But that would be the bare minimum, which would be sustaining the people who are already below the poverty line. Almost 60% of the country is below the poverty line. And 90% of the country is just, it subsists only on $2 a day. So this is something which the situation is dire. But again, the question arises that the Americans were there for the past 2 decades. So what kind of economy they have left in the country? What kind of industry or other levels of economic power they have left in the country? So that is a sorry state of affairs which they left. And then Afghans, those who have left the country, actually they had actually came from abroad when the new dispensation came into power, when Mr. Karzai took over power, or subsequently the power was handed over to Ashraf Ghani. So they and their ministers were mostly, they were known as briefcase ministers who came with the briefcases, and they got money, they got paid, and then they left. So this was unfortunate state of affairs. And in the indigenous Afghan expertise was not allowed to be developed the way a country can be run. So my worry is that in future, Afghanistan would be facing gigantic problems unless neighbors of Afghanistan come to immediate rescue of the Afghans and help them in all spheres of economic activity so that they can be back on their feet. Yes.
Of course, the economy, a key integral part of how the Afghan Taliban can move forward. I just want a very quick reaction from Moya Jaffer. I just want to quickly talk about physical money now. Of course, the Central Bank of Afghanistan doesn't actually print its own money. I just want your take on the money in circulation and perhaps, or the lack of money in circulation, perhaps see some of the currency go underground. And of course, we know that the Central Bank of Afghanistan actually has its money printed. And there was a second tranche which was due by a French company of some 100 billion Afghanis. That's the currency in Afghanistan. Your take on perhaps the issue with currency, the physical currency. Can you see that becoming a problem perhaps in the future?
It currently is somewhat of a problem, although the Taliban are trying to deal with it. They try to convince the people that there will not be any kind of economic chokehold when it came to the currency, and the amount, like you pointed out, will be delivered on time. But the uncertainty right now in the country that is being portrayed might not exist on the ground. Sumaira can tell us better about that. But what we're basically learning from international media outlets, like she pointed out, that there is no concrete, stable functioning of the government that has started as yet. You have to remember that these are people, the Taliban leadership, that have just come fresh from 20 years of war, and they're just like settling down into the administrative role. So yes, there will be there are people inside Afghanistan who have concerns, and it's a normal human reaction to hold on to whatever cash that you have for your life, not knowing what might happen, especially when the so-called policeman of this area that has been here for 20 years is not giving very positive signs. The United States and the West, they're raising concerns and alarms and expressing displeasure about things, the way the things have unfolded. So I believe it has to do with a lot of environment, as in any country in the world where investment and economic activity is basically driven by the sentiment, be that of businessmen or be that of the civilians in general. So this currency problem will ameliorate only after there is some sense of stability given by the West or portrayed or transmitted among the people of Afghanistan. And I see that happening now with the way Ambassador Durrani pointed out, and we talked earlier about, was the role of the regional countries who are looking to prevent this from becoming an economic crisis for Afghanis. And one last point, which is really important, is that when you talk about the salaries, it's kind of an oxymoronic approach by the United States, where they are not releasing money that needs to be paid to teachers who run the education system, while blaming Taliban for not running the education system and not being open to education of girls and other citizens of Afghanistan. So these are the matters which the sentiment in Afghanistan, once the tensions, the hype that has been created, and this 24/7 atmosphere of what has gone wrong now, unless and until that subsides and some level of normalcy prevails, and the international community stops putting every single second and tick of the clock Afghanistan and the Taliban under the microscope, only then can these matters, be sorted. As far as the situation on the ground, when it comes to the strategy regarding the banks and the currency is concerned, I believe Sumaira would be in a better position to answer that question.
Okay, well, we'll take a short break here, and then we'll bring in Suman, our Islamabad bureau chief, who has been in Afghanistan, to give us a little bit more insight as to the feeling on the ground, how business, she's already said, at the time where business as was usual. And I want to also ask Sumaira about the brain drain, which we're talking about, people, the exodus of the intellects out of Afghanistan, all of that and a little bit more after this break. Just stay with us. Welcome back. Just before the break, we were talking about how the Taliban will revive its state machinery, which to some degree has come to a grinding halt. And we've been discussing various different business challenges that they would be facing. I just want to bring in our Islamabad Bureau Chief, Sumaira Khan, who has been over and covering this in detail. Sumaira, I just want to talk to you a little bit about the brain drain. We've heard today as well, and from the spokesperson, perhaps it was, that they're encouraging people to go back to work. They're encouraging those particular officials, government officials, who are in key ministries, like, for example, the finance ministry, to get back to work. But then you've also got a very vivid scenes that we saw at the airport of people trying to flee. So there is a doubt, perhaps, that some people are looking to get out of Afghanistan. So of the brain drain, what did you generally feel, or what are the latest that you're getting from Afghanistan regarding the exodus, all this mass exodus that we're talking about, of the brain drain?
Yes, Adil, I would agree with you on this, that yes, it was a mass exodus, and this mass exodus was based on a kind of thinking that they are leaving Afghanistan in search of a better future. And you might be, you can recall my first report from there when I was reporting from the outside area of the Kabul International Airport, and I was stunned because I spoke to many of them, and they had established businesses in Kabul, they had good jobs in Kabul, even men, and they confessed to the idea that yes, we have good jobs in Kabul, we have never been asked by Taliban to leave our posts, and just they did not terminate our services from the key ministries, but still they were sitting outside that airport, and they were in a very humiliating way. They were waiting for they were waiting to get aboard those aircrafts, those who were taking off and landing, aimed at creating that one of the largest air evacuations of the world. And I kept asking them that what is making you leave your beautiful country behind, and there was no answer except of this, that we are looking for a better future out of Afghanistan. So this was quite a confusing statement for me, that if you have jobs, if you have businesses, if you have your settled future and settled present right now, then what is forcing you to leave Afghanistan? So there was just a rush. I still couldn't understand, and I think it will take a lot of time to, for me even, for myself even, to figure it out, that what was exactly making them flee their country. And there was I think a fourth grader kid as well. I spoke to him. He was hardly 8 years old, 7 years old, and I asked him, what are you doing here? And he was totally living without his parents, and he said that I need a job in America. And I said, who's going to give you a job in America? You are hardly 8. And where are your parents? And he said that my parents said, if you want to leave, you can leave right now. So these kinds of behaviors, if parents are asking their fourth grader to leave America, just flee their country, and then I asked another elderly person that if any of the Talib scouts or any of the foot soldiers, did they raid your house? Did they threaten you? Did they say anything? Are you frightened? They said, no, we did not face such things. But people are saying that Afghanistan is not secure to live anymore. So I asked him that you are almost 60 to 65 years old, what I can see and what I can judge. Are you sure you are going to get a good job, a respectable job in the country you want to flee to? And he had no answer. So there was a mix of sentiments. There was a mix of stories. I am carrying a lot of stories from Afghanistan back to Pakistan. And as I said, regarding that mass evacuation, I'm confused. I'm still confused that why they are leaving their settled present and settled future behind, and they just want to leave. With regards to Taliban's request to their brain drain, the brain drain people who already left Afghanistan, let me tell you one thing. Amongst those 130,000 people, the mass exodus and the mass airlift operation done by Americans, I am sure that those Afghans at risk who helped the foreign forces, who helped the other development agencies of the other countries, the majority of those people are still stuck in Afghanistan. But in that rush, in that hustle bustle, people who had nothing to do with threats and people who had nothing to do with Afghan at risk factor, they are right now sitting at Al Udeid Air Base, Doha, Qatar, and they have been transported to different countries, including US. But still, we have majority of people who are still at risk. They feel that Taliban are going to harm them. They are still stuck in Afghanistan.
A very interesting take as Samira is describing some of these stories perhaps not getting out to the Western media agencies as to what the reality is on the ground. And as we talk about an exodus, we're talking about also the influx of investment or the lack of it. Now, I just want to highlight a very important sort of like business challenge perhaps that the Afghan Taliban have looked at, perhaps that they will look at some point, which is TAPI. Now, for TAPI who don't know TAPI, it's the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India gas pipeline, which is actually running or planned to run through from Turkey, which would be supplying gas to Pakistan and obviously to India. Now, obviously, the transit revenues that Afghanistan could generate from that. Coming to you, Ambassador Durrani, do the Afghan Taliban or this particular caretaker government, in your opinion, have the nous, the foresight to understand the complexities of such an agreement, such as TAPI? And, for example, we know that many of the European countries who are part of the building process or providing infrastructural support, they now are pretty much hands-off. Do you think that something of this size, a TAPI, will fall through eventually and become redundant, or do you think that they are savvy enough to salvage it?
Well, it's an interesting question. It is Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline, TAPI. But like IPI, Iran-Pakistan, India pipeline, India pulled out from that pipeline. And I'm not sure whether Indians would still be interested to go for the TAPI. That is one point. Secondly, Americans were quite interested about the TAPI because when we were signing the agreement with Iran in 2013, American ambassador would come to the presidency when Mr. Zardari was the president and impressing upon the president and others that please don't sign this agreement with the Iranians. But he could not give a satisfactory answer that what is the alternate with us. With regard to TAPI, it has been a hanging fire for more than 2 decades. Yes, Taliban, when they were still fighting against the Americans, they had assured that they will not harm the TAPI pipeline if the work starts. And during Ashraf Ghani's time, there was a movement to start work, and with Turkmenistan, rates were finalized, and Afghanistan's transit fee was finalized. So, but it all depends how much investment it attracts and where are the investors. Naturally, most of the time it would be the Western investors, but I think China can jump in, and China has the necessary wherewithal to not construct but invest in the project. China is also there already. They have had their investment in INAC copper project in Logar province, but they could not excavate because of the security reasons. So main issue is if peace returns to Afghanistan, then everything would return, whether it is stability, economic prosperity, progress, and human development. Everything is possible, but it is linked to peace. And right now, the kind of rush where the people want to leave the country, I think they will be returning back if peace returns, if investments come to back. And I don't think that Afghanistan will be left or it would be isolated for much longer time, because Afghanistan's potential, especially with regard to rare earth materials, is vast. And 2 decades ago, I have been telling earlier also, 2 decades ago, no one had the idea that how big these rare earth materials are in Afghanistan. But now the estimates are, and scientific estimates are, that close to $1 trillion. So this makes Afghanistan a lucrative place to invest. So, and I think the foremost candidates are likely to be the Chinese. So here, while initially there are challenges for the Taliban government, but if they establish peace in the country, then I think everything would flow. And immediate neighbors are likely to be the first ones to enter in Afghanistan, both from political point of view as well as economically. And then I think other countries are likely to follow. And I don't think that Americans are going to stay away for a much longer a period. Because I recall that when Taliban in their first government, Americans were negotiating through the coal company regarding the TAPI project. So, so it is when we talk about big money, so Americans cannot stay away. This is what they are. Since the big money was here in the war, so their military-industrial complex was involved. So they were involved in Afghanistan. But once it started giving diminishing returns, so they had to wind up and go back. Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to move on very quickly. So we're coming to the end of the program, but it's a very, very important topic. It's obviously COVID, probably gone under the radar. I just want to quickly bring your attention to the latest figures from worldometer.info. The current cases in Afghanistan, 153,962. Number of deaths so far, 7,164, and those who have recovered is 114,939 from a population of circa 40 million. Of only 1.8 million vaccines have been administered so far. Now, reports are suggesting that this is accelerating. Why is it accelerating? Of course, infection prevention protocols, the lack of vaccines, the lack of facilities. So let's now discuss this in a little bit more detail. Let's go over to Amoyed Jafri. Amoyed, of course, we've seen the pledge by the Chinese of the recent 3 million, I believe it's vaccines, as well as other aid. And the cases, albeit they are not as many as we've seen in Western countries, testing has been very low. Only 500,000 are carried out so far from a population of 40. Now, perhaps I would like to take your take on the Taliban's interpretation of vaccines. We've seen in the past how they have stood against polio vaccination. And of course, there is this, God will look after us. And they would not like to preempt or try to change the future by having some sort of a vaccine. So your take on how the Taliban may or may not react to this pandemic coronavirus, which is sweeping through Afghanistan apparently at this moment?
While we do not have a particular statement in this regard from the Taliban on the record recently, but what we can work with is basically the way they reacted to the pandemic when at the start of when it was like going great guns and people were getting infected and the entire world was trying to come to grips with it. Provinces in which the Taliban were even back then, where they were claiming that they have control and they were in charge, we did see proper COVID care where they were talking about and they were treating patients and even dispensing vaccines to people who were basically willing to come forward and get vaccinated. There was no official word, as in from Taliban leadership, from Zabiullah Mujahid or from Suhail Shaheen for that matter, but the system on the ground, the mechanism on the ground regarding healthcare in those provinces, there was not any significant opposition or clear stance against vaccination when it came to the pandemic. So I think it would be fair to assume that they would not stand against the vaccine campaign against COVID-19. Also, like I pointed out earlier and you mentioned again, that China has pledged 3 million COVID-19 vaccines to go into Afghanistan. And there has been very, very scarce amount of testing in Afghanistan. We do not know the real numbers of people. There could be millions. There could be, even beyond that. So the problem we have right now is a country that has been through war. Access was limited because there was a war going on in the majority of the country, parts of the country. So it's a massive, massive challenge. And because China has pledged 3 million vaccines, I'm sure that decision comes after some sort of an understanding between the Taliban government and the Chinese administration. Otherwise, they wouldn't have,
've,
've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've, 've,
I just want to get concluding remarks from Sumera Khan. Sumera, while you were out there, you probably did get an opportunity to visit some of the health facilities perhaps there. Feeling on the ground there, did you get a sense of urgency from the people that they knew what COVID was? Were they worried what COVID was? You just have to look at some of the scenes at the airport. There wasn't any social distancing as we know it across the educated world, or the informed world rather, I should say. Do you think that many of the people of Afghanistan are keen to take this vaccine, regardless of what the Afghan Taliban interpret it as?
I think first of all they have to be instilled with this idea that vaccine is it's mandatory for you, because even now we have seen few sanitizers and masks in all the offices being handled and being that they were taken over by Taliban earlier. Yes, they are taking care of all the SOPs, but in the masses, in the general people, we did not see any kind of care. They never cared for adopting those SOPs in general public. And you have seen sites of, you have seen visuals from the outskirts of not just Kabul airport, but within the city. You must have seen everything. Even if somewhere I wanted to wear my mask and they used to get offended on that you are feeling bad, like sitting next to us, you are feeling you feel threatened. We are going to be a source of COVID for you, or you already have a COVID breath. So it was a kind of a joke for us. It had become a joke for us that you can't even wear mask, and they are not ready to wear their mask. They are not ready to abide by all the SOPs. So in Afghanistan, they are hardly taking care of all these threats of COVID-19. The majority of the people, because they are poor, they are not literate enough that they don't have any idea what COVID is exactly and how world is going about COVID exactly. So I saw this lack of knowledge amongst the masses. But yes, in the government offices, they are taking care of all the SOPs, and they are trying to. But as I said, they are handling so many things right now. They have a lot of things in their plate right now. They are hardly focused on how to convince people to take care of all the SOPs and to take care of this COVID disease and how to go about it carefully. So I think it will take a lot of time to make them aware of the threats of this disease.
And a very interesting catch-22. I mean, on the one side you have no self-protection, leave it to Providence. On the other side you have stay at home, which is the best form of social distancing in a way, you could say. Some important developments coming up in the next couple of days. Don't forget, 9/11, the anniversary, 20 years on. Who has been invited? Who will attend? Who will give recognition to the Afghan Taliban? We'll keep an eye on that over the next couple of days. Same time, place. See you tomorrow.